Well, hello everyone. My name is Justin Dyke with Tualatin Valley Water District. Thank you for joining us today. It's the May edition of Talkin' Water. Really appreciate everyone for taking time out of your day, your lunch break, whatever's going on in your busy world to join us to talk about irrigation controller and maximizing irrigation controller. I'm sure, like many of you noticed last weekend, the weather got hot. If you're like me, you probably realize that means you're behind on your spring irrigation tune-up, which means I've got a list of things to do this coming weekend. So I will be selfish in saying I'm really excited about this presentation because I need to learn a few things. But with that, as we get going today, want to just lay a couple of quick ground rules. These sessions are recorded, so don't feel like you need to take copious notes right now because you can always go back and watch this meeting on YouTube later. Please make sure your microphone is muted. And there will be a moderated Q&A. This side says it's after the presentation. However, we're going to jump into the Q&A in just a moment because a lot of the times with this presentation, this topic in particular, folks have a lot of questions and we also have a lot of great content. So we want to make sure we get to questions early and have adequate time for them. And then we can do a Q&A after as well if it's needed. Now, a couple of things in the picture there in the middle of that slide. You can always raise your hand. You can use the thought bubbles to use the Q&A function. And over toward the right is the microphone function. That should be muted for everyone who's joined the presentation today. But if you have a question, once we get to the Q&A component, you can unmute yourself, ask your question directly of myself or Steve. And as always, if you have accessibility needs, you can use the ellipsis in the corner, in the lower left corner. You can modify the version of that slides. You can enlarge the text. You can change other settings just for yourself. It doesn't change it for everyone. But if it helps your viewing experience, that is great. We encourage you to do that. And we operate in an inclusive and discrimination-free manner. So we will exclude participants who disrupt today's events if it happens. So I will happily introduce Steve Carper. He's our conservation technician, and I'll encourage Steve right now to go ahead and take control of the slides. And while Steve is doing that, we're just going to jump directly into a Q&A. If there are any people in the audience today who have questions about their irrigation, front yard, backyard, whatever it is for your home, and you have a burning desire to hear from Steve directly related to your situation, please raise your hand or type something in the chat. And if no one has anything, I will be selfish and ask a couple questions because I have them. Not seeing any hands yet. Steve, do you want to say hi real quick? Introduce yourself.
Sure. Thanks, Justin. And good morning or good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. And yeah, we're excited to kind of take a little different tack this afternoon and try and let you, the attendees, guide the conversation as much as possible. Generally, folks have questions that are common to one another, and it's a good opportunity to learn from each other. So we really wanted to take that opportunity. I've got plenty of slides of my regular spring tune-up, and again, focusing on controller efficiency and efficacy that we want to touch on before the presentation and discussion is over. But we really want to make sure that we address any questions that folks have to make sure you get your irrigation season off to the right start. So it looks like I see one hand raised. So Justin, why don't you take it away with them and we'll get to it.
Yeah, Rick, go for it. Rick, what's your question?
Yeah, just a real quick one. So I moved into an older house. It has a sprinkler system. I'm not sure it's been used for a while. And my question is, when I turn on the water on this, is there a way, what's the best known method on how I determine if it's like leaking underground? Like to do a pressure test, or do you just, I'm not sure what the best way to see if it's all working still, you know?
Okay, well, so first, have you kind of walked the yard to determine if you have like an isolation valve, or do you know how to turn it on?
Yes.
Okay. So the first thing I would do is do that. Make sure if you have a backflow device, make sure that the check valves on that device are off and that the test cocks are closed. And then when you pressurize your system, you always want to open up that isolation valve near the point of connection, basically where the irrigation system is connecting to the main water supply to the house. You always want to open that up nice and slow at the first part of spring, so you don't shock the rest of the irrigation system with the sometimes high pressure. So open that up nice and slow. You can usually kind of hear that happening. And once that sound of the rushing water stops, what I would do to check the main line is then at that point, make sure everything in the house is off. You're not running the dishwasher, nobody's showering or anything like that. Go locate your meter, open up the meter pit lid, and you're going to see something like this. Let's see, I can't see myself quite well enough, but there's a little, sorry, I got to close a little window here. Look at the dial.
Just watch if water's flowing where it shouldn't when everything's
Exactly.
turned off. Yeah.
If everything is off, then you should see no movement on the meter dial, either the large red sweep hand, or there's also a small little blue, I call it the snowflake. It's blurring. I need to get a little closer to it. Sorry, everybody. You can get my face as much as you get the meter. But that little blue snowflake will indicate, even if a small amount of water is moving through the meter, that little snowflake dial, a low flow indicator, will spin as well. And so if everything else is off and you've only pressurized the irrigation system, you don't have any valves that are active, then that would be an indicator that you probably do have some sort of a leak in the main line. In the lateral lines, it can be a little more tricky because when you activate individual zones, one at a time, they're gonna go. They're going to run. So you can walk the individual zone and just observe. Do you see water surfacing in areas adjacent to the irrigation heads that looks abnormal? Water should basically be spraying uniformly out of the sprinkler heads in a nice pattern, hopefully. But if you see things percolating up from the soil, then there's your cue to start digging once the zone is off, kind of figure out. And generally, once you start disturbing the soil where that is happening, the water will assist in that excavation effort and make it pretty clear where the issue is in pretty short order. The other thing that you can do if you really want to get into it, if you're confident something seems amiss, is you can go around, count the individual sprinkler heads, and if you know the manufacturer, you can determine based on the pattern, say a full circle, half circle, quarter circle. You can go on the manufacturer's website and pull up basically a nozzle chart, and you can determine the flow rate, gallons per minute, of that type of sprinkler nozzle. And so, for example, if you've got 4 quarter circles that are rated 1 gallon per minute, you know that zone should be using 4 gallons per minute, right? And then you can compare that, go back to your meter, set your timer for a minute, let it go around. Now the meter's going to record water flow in cubic feet. You'd need to do a conversion, but basically you can do a comparison there. So if based on the type of sprinklers that you have in that zone should have 4 gallons per minute, and it's clear that you're using a lot more than that, then that's another indicator that something's going on subsurface that may not be surfacing and giving you a visual confirmation. But that's another way to, kind of a deep dive. In most cases, in a residential setting, the lines are close enough to the surface that it's gonna make itself pretty clear, and that's a fairly technical way to go about diagnosing potential leaks, more of an audit approach, but that's one way that you can really evaluate the entire system if you want to get to that level.
Right. Hey, thank you very much.
Great question. Thank you, Rick. I want to see then if there are any other questions right off the top that our community has today. And while we maybe wait for some, Steve, I'll go ahead and ask you one that
Sure.
I've got going on. Is it okay to use different sprinkler types on the same irrigation zone? I've definitely got that going on. I got to mix and match.
You really want to avoid that, and I'm going to try and scroll ahead to a different slide where I've got some pictures that will help me illustrate that. Bear with me for a moment here. There we go. So different types of sprinklers have different precipitation rates. They're going to apply water faster or slower depending on the type. And in this slide, can you all see the 3 different sprinklers here? Looking good? Okay. So on the left, we see what's called, what I call a pop-up fixed pattern spray, the most common by far type of sprinkler that's out there. And these types of sprinkler put down water relatively quickly, basically about a gallon and a half per minute, or excuse me, inch and a half per minute precipitation rate, depending on the area, compared to what are also on the right is what's called a single stream rotor, also very common. And over the last 10 years or so, you're seeing more and more of these high efficiency multi-stream rotors, which are really a great nozzle type. But these are the biggest thing that I see mixed are these fixed pattern sprays and single stream rotors. And you really want to avoid that because a single stream rotor is going to put down water about half as fast as a fixed spray pattern for the given area. If you just kind of think about that, you've got a single stream of water slowly oscillating back and forth compared to, a set constant stream of water over a quarter circle, half circle, full circle, whatever it might be. So if you're blending those, and if you're scheduling according to the fixed spray, wherever the rotor is, most likely you're going to be underwatering it, just unless it's just, by chance in the plant material that you have, it happens to work out. But if you're watering, say, a lawn and you're combining those two types of sprinklers, then the rotor area is going to underwater. Conversely, if you schedule that zone based on how the rotor applies water, then the area that is watered by the pop-up spray fixed pattern is going to overwater, just because by the nature of their precipitation rate. So you really want to avoid that. The exception to that can be, and this can be a workaround because unfortunately, it's fairly common that people do this and then somebody else moves in and they have to try and resolve that situation. These multi-stream rotating high efficiency nozzles can be more effectively grouped with a single stream rotor because they have more similar precipitation rate. So if you happen to be in a situation where you see that happening in your yard, the easiest solution, or interim solution ideally, would be to swap out the let's see if I can pull over to a lid, swap out the fixed pattern nozzle with a multi-stream rotating nozzle. And generally they are compatible with most sprinkler bodies. If it's a Hunter or Rainbird manufacturer, the way they're threaded is compatible with most of the multi-stream rotating nozzles. And it's just a matter of, just for demonstration purposes, getting your sprinkler head to pop up, unscrewing this nozzle at the top, popping it out, putting in a new one, setting it to the right arc and direction, dropping it back in, and you're off and running. But in general, you really want to avoid mixing rotors and fixed spray.
Awesome. Thank you for that. That is great to know. We do have a couple questions in the chat, although I did see someone named Theo had raised their hand. Theo, do you want to take a moment, jump back up here and ask your question?
Sure. I was going to type it up and I wasn't sure if you wanted audio questions or typed questions, but I'm happy to chat or speak.
Sure.
So I have a Ratio smart controller that I've had for years, 5 years, connected into our roughly 10 zone system. And I've tried to optimize it over the years to not overwater and keep the water bills under control. And I have two questions. It's also hooked up to Wi-Fi, right? So it knows what the weather is, and it tries to optimize if there's rain or it's been damp. And I haven't researched this yet, but I'm just curious if you know or have opinions about this. Is it possible to integrate soil moisture sensors into a smart irrigation system to have it do more than just detect, what's going on with the weather, but decide whether the grass needs water or not? That's question one.
Question one. So I want to preface this answer by saying today, we're really, I'll try to, I don't believe soil moisture is compatible with Ratio. I would you can verify that, but I'm pretty confident. I've never heard of somebody incorporating soil moisture sensing into the Ratio system based on how they work. That said, the technology, like most things right now, is evolving rapidly. So I wouldn't be surprised if they incorporate a way to do that at some point. But right now, I believe most of their weather-based functionality is based on weather forecasting. And they do have a way to incorporate basically a weather station. But I've not seen an example of a soil moisture sensor being incorporated into that system, but don't hold me to that. The second part of this is today we really are addressing what I'm going to call standard irrigation controllers, which are sort of the controllers that have been around for the last 20 years or so that are fairly ubiquitous around the area in terms of what I see in customer homes, unless you've participated in our rebate program or in the last 5-10 years installed a weather-based controller. So what I would encourage you to do, Theo, is join us on July 8th, where we're going to focus on weather-based irrigation controllers and getting those system optimized, because it's kind of a whole nother ball of wax compared to kind of the traditional scheduling challenges that people are dealing with standard controllers. But that said, optimizing these newer systems has some challenges in itself, and I'm dealing with it at my own house and trying to really get it fine-tuned. I love it and it's working well, but it's one of those things where if the layout and the system performance is not optimized and you put a weather-based controller on a system like that, you're probably going to have some challenges because it's going to assume that the system layout and design is pretty top-notch and really well maintained. So generally, the solution is a combination of, again, making sure that you're maintaining, you've got your system optimized as best you can, and then if you're still seeing some deficiency, whether it's overwatering or underwatering, looking for the different parameters in a weather-based controller to see what you might be able to tweak to get it to fine-tune how it's either applying a little bit more or a little bit less.
That's really helpful, and I look forward to that July 8th session. And I actually do have an ambient science smart weather station hooked up to
Awesome.
to Wi-Fi in my yard, so I didn't know that I might be able to incorporate that. So I'll just quickly ask the second question. I won't get into any more controller stuff, but this is more about rates. We've had pretty steady usage of water and gallons during the summer months during irrigation, and then last year when the bill came in, it went from like $700 to $1,200, and I haven't had a chance to look at the year-over-year rates to see how much that might have impacted it, but I'm pretty sure our water usage didn't go up by that percentage. So did the rates go up a lot last year, or is there some way to see the history of the rates? Do you guys have that?
Yeah, Theo, I can jump in on that. The rates went up 3% last year. That was the board adopted rate increase. So not a big rate increase, especially compared to some of the ones we've done in the past to fund our investments in infrastructure. However, what we could do is, if you'd like, you can put your email in the chat and we can connect you with someone on our customer service team. What they can do is also do that year-over-year review of your usage to see if there were any spikes in usage that might tell us either something in your irrigation or something else about the consumption. And we can line up your year-over-year comparison with the rates when they became effective, and we can even look at your billing cycle timing, depending on when in the summer versus fall months you get that 2-month water bill. So if that's of interest to you, or you can always contact our customer service team directly at any point and ask for that service, because I think you sound like you're right up there on the crux of the question is what was the cost of summer irrigation water that you see seasonally and likely predictably as you maintain your irrigation versus the increase in water rates. So we'd be happy to dive into that on a more singular basis with your account for you.
Great, thank you. I will contact your customer service. Thank you very much.
And
Absolutely.
take a note of my email as well. And if for some reason your question is a little more technical than the customer service is able to address relative to irrigation, just send me an email and I'm happy to take a look at your account as well and see if anything jumps out to me.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
All right, so we got a couple questions in the chat for you, Steve. Karen asks, what is the best type of sprinkler head to use for maximum efficiency?
Oh, that's easy. Let's stay on this same slide. That would be the multi-stream, multi-trajectory rotating nozzle, Karen. Various manufacturers produce them. And the great thing about these is that they are compatible to most pop-up fixed sprays. So it's just a matter, you don't have to replace the entire sprinkler body if what you're replacing is a regular fixed spray pop-up traditional. It's just a matter of, again, taking out that first nozzle, popping in the new one, making sure it's adjusted properly, and then adjusting the timing at the controller. Because again, the great thing about these is they're going to put down water much slower. So it's not necessarily a matter of using less water based on for the plant need, but the great thing about these nozzles is because of the way they're designed, that multi-trajectory. So each stream, it's hard to see in this picture. I want to scroll and see if I can find a better image of how these perform. The multiple trajectories. Yeah, here's a little bit better image. This each stream comes out at a little different angle, and then it just kind of rotates around in a pattern. They're kind of fun to look at too. But the distribution uniformity across the area being watered is much better compared to a fixed pattern spray head, which tends to concentrate water at the edge of the pattern. You tend to have a little more of a lighter distribution sort of in the mid-range. A lot of them try to compensate by having a little bit of water kind of come out near the nozzle, but the uniformity with these multi-stream rotating nozzles is really hard to beat. And if you happen to be a TVWD customer, we offer a $3 rebate per nozzle on those devices.
Awesome. Next question. Admittedly, I've not seen a name on it because I'm not sure why. Anyways, it's a question that I've also done myself. So I have a sprinkler head that's a bit high and often gets clipped by my lawnmower. Guilty over here as well. Is there a way to fix that issue?
Yeah, so if it continuously gets clipped by a lawnmower, it could be a couple different things. So here's your sprinkler head. I wonder if turning off, you guys can see that. I can see it all right. So the top of the sprinkler head should ideally be right at the top of where like the mulch or compost, if it's in a garden flower bed type setting, or if it's in the turf, it should be at the top of the soil level, basically where, no, not down in. You really want it to be right there, because the challenge is, and sprinklers sink over time. So this is a common issue that folks face, and that I often encourage them to address when I'm doing assessments, is that in time, sprinklers tend to sink down into the soil. And what can happen when that occurs is that the pop-up mechanism becomes dirty and compromised, and if it rises and goes down and rises and goes down, soil and debris gets down into that shaft and can make it a little more sticky, and sometimes the stem does not then retract all the way, even if it's sticking up an inch taller. Or sometimes you probably have seen them in neighbors' yards or your own, where my son loves nothing more than on our walks to walk around and correct everybody's sprinkler heads that are still sticking up. But then the landscaper doesn't always notice that, or you may not see it either. It's easy to do, and then your mower clips off that nozzle, and then you have a nice geyser occurring the next time your sprinkler goes off. So again, just making sure that and it's not a terribly technical fix, but it can be a little tricky, because you have to dig down just enough so that you can create some clearance underneath the sprinkler to push it down or raise it up, whichever the case may be. It sounds like your case, it might be set a little bit too high for a lawn setting, but it depends. You want to evaluate that. If you clear away the turf from the head, you want to be able to, again, see the entire top of the sprinkler. If it's really overgrown, and again, debris is probably getting down onto that nozzle and the stem as it operates, that may be more the issue, as opposed to it being too high. You want to just evaluate that. But if the sprinkler head is down and nice and level with the soil, it's probably good. Then you just want to test it. Operate the zone and see, does the stem come up and activate when it's on, and then retract fully when the zone turns off. Then you're probably good to go from there.
Fantastic. I've got a customer named Kevin with a couple of questions for you, Steve. So Kevin says, we will be extending our patio. What is the best way to cap off the sprinkler heads that will not be needed in the future? Will it be sufficient to cap it off at the sprinkler head?
Are the sprinklers where the patio is going to be? if
Kevin, if you'd like, you can come off of mute and he says yes in the chat.
Okay, so what I would say is you don't want to leave sprinkler infrastructure. So any pipe, funny pipe. Funny pipe is the pipe that it's basically flexible tubing that goes from the end of the PVC, which is the white plastic pipe. It's a black flexible tubing that goes generally about 18 inches or so from the end of the PVC and connects into the bottom of your sprinkler head. I would not ever knowingly leave any sprinkler equipment underneath hardscape. So anything that's going to be real expensive or physically difficult to remedy in the future should something go wrong. So particularly if you're going to have concrete contractors, not that I've ever had any bad experiences with concrete contractors as a landscaper, you just want to get that stuff out of the way. But then also keep in mind after you extend the patio, what's your vision for the landscape? Do you want to have a sprinkler head really close to that to water any plant material that you might be doing along that border? So first, get it out of the way so any construction work is not going to damage the PVC or the funny part. But again, you just don't, even if you don't want to just bury it and hope for the best is kind of what I'm getting at. But you want to move it, so figure out where that PVC line is, cut down and cap it there, or leave a piece of pipe coming up that's capped off, so that once the construction is done, you know where that line is, and then you can adapt your irrigation system to the new layout of your landscape, and it leaves you the opportunity to continue watering with something new.
And then Kevin's follow-up is, Steve, what brand of weather-based controller do you use?
Well, as a public employee, I cannot recommend any specific brand over the other. But what I can tell you is that in terms of our rebate program participation, Rachio has by far in a way been the most popular unit to take advantage. Personally, what I use is the Orbit. And I have an 8-zone Orbit weather-based irrigation controller, and it's what's the name of it? The Beehive. The reason I went with the Beehive model is I also have what's called it's a flume meter monitoring device. So it's a device that attaches to my meter until City of Beaverton installs an AMI, which I'm pretty excited about, which is basically a smart water meter that's going to have really great, like 15-minute meter reading resolution. We don't quite have that yet. So right now I have a device on my meter that basically measures the water flowing through there every 5 seconds. And then it connects to my Wi-Fi. It sends me alerts if I have any constant flow or anything that might give it a leak signal, a leak indicator. And I really wanted the Beehive unit integrates with that flume unit, so they can connect and talk to each other, and I can look on my phone, and it's not the greatest interface, but I can get to it and I can see that information to kind of verify how's the flow, so I can kind of see, gosh, am I happy with the way this is performing, or do I, as Theo was mentioning, do I want to continue kind of digging into this and see is there opportunity for me to continue optimizing my system. That said, there's all the big manufacturers have weather-based controllers. The biggest thing that I would point you to for weather-based controller, particularly if you want to receive a rebate, it's just got to have this WaterSense label. And WaterSense is basically the Energy Star of the water world. It's an EPA certification that these products have been third-party tested for performance and efficiency. And one of the criteria is that anything that's WaterSense certified is going to be 20% more efficient than your standard controllers. And when we're talking about irrigation controllers, that's pretty easy to accomplish, assuming again that the performance of the hardware, the distribution system, if you will, of the irrigation system is well maintained, well designed, and performing well. Weather-based irrigation, it's hard to go. What I would recommend that you do, just make sure it's WaterSense certified. Most all of them are. It's pretty hard to find one, a reputable one that's not. get online and look at the features, how it's set, the different capabilities. Does it take other sensors that you might want to be? Are you a water geek and you want, like me, that wants to do weather stations or maybe soil moisture, or do you want to incorporate a meter monitoring device? Does it have that capability? Does it look like it's an easy user interface? Do you want it to be all solely based from your smart tablet or phone, or do you want the ability to go out to the garage and poke the buttons on the console itself? And then pick the one that looks the best to you, because really the big players in the market, I think, again, if they've got that WaterSense label, it's been tested and certified, it'll qualify for a rebate. It's really just a matter of picking one that you feel comfortable using.
All right. We're going to have one more question here from the chat, and then Steve, you can get into some of your slides and we can check in again after some slides. But our last question, real quick. Margot asks, I'd like an expert to come to my house and assess my system for efficiency. Recommendations?
I would recommend that you send me an email or give me a call. My contact information will be on the last slide, and then I'd be happy to take a review of your account. And then based on what I see there, we can either have a conversation. But if it looks like there's an opportunity for me to help you out in a significant way, then we can certainly schedule an on-site review.
Awesome. Well, Steve, why don't you jump into some of your slides, help these folks get ready for the irrigation season, and then we'll check in with questions again after.
All right. I see Dorothy's. Well, yeah, we'll come back. Let me scroll back here. Let's see. My scroll working. There we go. All right. So back to the beginning. To irrigate efficiently, we got to do a little bit of tune-up work every spring, and it's that time of year, as Justin mentioned. My son and I were actually out last weekend repairing I thought I had one broken sprinkler head, and we dug down, got it fixed up, turned on the system to test it out, and the sprinkler 5 feet away exploded. So obviously I've got some pressure issues to deal with, but it's also pretty common with irrigation, particularly in 20-year-old systems, is as you make repairs, sometimes other weak spots will make themselves pretty apparent pretty quickly. So my tune-up work continues as well. There's some tools that are really handy to have around as you take this endeavor on. Having a large screwdriver to get into your valve boxes, getting those lids open can be a little tricky sometimes. A small flathead screwdriver like this can really be helpful to adjust your pop-up fixed spray nozzles and get them dialed in just the way you want them. Specialty adjustment tools, which I'll show you in a later slide for the various types of sprinkler heads, come in very handy. So you kind of have to know what's your system, then go typically to a specialty irrigation shop like Ewing or Horizon that we have locally, and they can typically help you out regardless of what your needs are to make sure that you can get things adjusted properly. A hand spade, basically a small shovel, can be really handy for both doing that work to adjust your sprinkler heads up or down without disturbing the soil more than you need to. Rarely do you want to be using a giant, typical traditional bent shovel when you're just trying to do simple modifications to a sprinkler head. So a small hand shovel or a small narrow trenching shovel can be really useful for that type of work. Also for cleaning out your valve boxes that often can get compromised by gophers more often moles or voles get in there and can kind of backfill around your irrigation control valves. So it's a good idea to get in there and clean those out so you can quickly get in there and address any issues, maintain them. It's nice to have room to work, and sometimes those critters can make that a challenge. A valve key, I'll show you what that is here in a couple slides for specialty valves to make sure you can easily open and close those. Gloves for safety, keep your knuckles free of superficial nicks and cuts, which mine are full of. Flashlight can come in handy, and then if you got old knees like mine, having some knee pad can make the job a lot more pleasant and easy to get through. So just some basic tricks of the trade. As we mentioned, how do you kind of charge your system. And if it's not something that you've done before, or if you're new to your home and you're still learning about your system, you want to open up your valve boxes. And first thing to do is make sure you close any potential drain valves that you may have on your system. And this is a brand new installation, but it's just, these are two illustrations of where you might typically find a drain valve on your lateral line or just down of the main line. So here you see sort of a spigot type valve on the electronic valve manifold, and it's just a typical, righty-tighty, lefty-loosey to open and close a drain like that. Then here on the main line, just downstream of your backflow prevention device, that's what we call a cross-top valve. And similar, it's a way to provide drainage on the main line. But if you forget, and if you happen to have these and you don't close them when you open up the isolation valve, they'll pretty quickly make themselves apparent because you'll have water gushing up and out. And you want to avoid that because it kind of makes a mess of your valve assemblies. So just check. It's very common to not have drain lines. So if you don't see them in our area, frankly, it's not a big deal. We don't tend to get deep, heavy freezes that necessitate draining the main and lateral lines. It's always best practice to do that if you've got them. But again, not worth tearing out your system or going to great lengths to install them if you don't see them. This slide will just illustrate the different types of valves that you might encounter on your system. The first here on the left is what we call a ball valve, and they're typically are going to have a handle like this. Sometimes it's more of a split handle, but often it's just this big swing handle. And the thing to keep in mind when you're operating a ball valve is when that handle is parallel to the pipe, the valve is open. When the handle is perpendicular to the pipe, the valve is closed. Just keep that in mind. As we mentioned, the spigot type valves, good old, righty-tighty, lefty-loosey. Righty-tighty will close it down. Lefty-loosey will open it up and get it flowing. This is the cross type valve. I don't know why folks install these because they can be pretty tricky to operate if you don't happen to have one of these keys handy. If you see one of these and you don't, you might have to run to Ace or Home Depot to pick up the cross top valve key, and this little fork goes in between those cross tops and just makes it easier for you to manipulate that valve to open or to close again. The lefty loosen to open, righty tighty to close it down. The next thing you want to do is after you've got any drain valves closed off is determine, do I have a isolation valve at my point of connection? It's most common to find an isolation valve in a small 6 or 9 inch round valve box located somewhere close to the backflow prevention device. In our area, in most cases, it's going to be a double check backflow prevention assembly located subgrade in a valve box, a rectangular valve box like this. So you want to look for that, again, that round valve box proximal to that. And then you're either going to have the cross-top valve, a ball valve. Sometimes they can be PVC, but that configuration is the same. Again, perpendicular handle, valve is closed, parallel, it's open. Or you may have a gate valve, which kind of has that spigot handle. And sometimes you may have valve boxes that are indeterminate devices down there. Irrigation is one of those things where, boy, it's amazing what folks will build sometimes. But if it's not really clear, you may find some mystery boxes sometimes. So you might need to get some professional assessment if you encounter something that you're not able to quickly diagnose. And sometimes, unfortunately, systems are constructed without an isolation valve. So if you don't have that, whoever constructed that system may have relied on the backflow prevention device to act as an isolation valve. And so we'll talk about that here in the next couple slides. So here's some examples of backflow prevention assemblies. Now, the state of Oregon requires you to have backflow prevention on any irrigation system. The assembly type devices we have, the assemblies, if it is an assembly, and basically what that means is it's a system of two valves on the inlet and the outlet of the device, and that's true on this, which is a double check backflow prevention assembly. And this is what's called a pressure vacuum assembly. Double checks are typically subgrade in a valve box, and then pressure vacuum breakers are then Cal's on the line. He can correct me if I'm wrong. I believe they need to be 6 inches above the highest level of the highest sprinkler in your system to be performing adequately. It's been a long time since I did my my testing certification, like 20 years. So I get a little rusty on which one, what height it needs to be on. But the key thing to remember about these two things is they need to be tested annually. State of Oregon requires that. And if that's something that you need help with, the TVWD has a great program, the Gold program, where you can contact our water resource folks and they'll get you set up to get that scheduled and handled so you don't have to try and remember to get that done. It's pretty reasonable, I believe. Well, don't quote me on the price, but it's reasonable. They also build in an automatic like $50 worth of repair if it's necessary. It's not an additional cost. So it's a great program to help you deal with that testing requirement. But the main thing before you turn on your system, you want to go to your backflow assembly, and we want to take a look at these things. If the system was winterized properly, then often the ball valves on either end of the assembly will be left half open. And then generally these test cocks, which also have little ball valves in them, and those ball valves are controlled by these little screwdriver actuators here. And it's the same principle as a handled ball valve. So if the screwdriver slot is perpendicular to the line of the test cock, it's closed. If the screw slot is parallel, it's open. So if you were to open that point of connection, you would pretty quickly see water gushing out of these test ports. So you want to make sure that the test cocks are closed before you activate and pressurize the system. Also, we want to go ahead and close the ball valve so that we can kind of pressurize one step at a time. If you close the ball valves on the backflow assembly, then we can go back to the point of connection, slowly open that up, and that'll pressurize the main line in between the point of connection and the backflow device. Then you can open up the upstream ball valve, pressurize the assembly, and then slowly open up the number 2 shutoff to pressurize the rest of your system up to the electronic valves. And again, that just provides you a nice, gentle way to pressurize the system without shocking any of the components. And again, making sure that you've got all of your test ports and things, the valves closed, and so that the test cocks are closed so you're not going to have any leakage, and then the ball valves are open so that the system is pressurized. Any questions on that specifically before we move on? That can be a little tricky. Once you've got your system pressurized, you're ready to kind of do a walkthrough and check how the sprinklers are performing. Make sure that you don't have any of those subsurface leaks popping up and occurring that we touched on earlier, but we're really making sure that the nozzles are pointing where they need to be. If you've got fixed patterns, for example, a quarter circle that we're spraying along the edge of the landscape in a quarter circle pattern, and we're not, we don't have half the pattern going out onto the driveway or the sidewalk. Many times, it's pretty common to have adjustable nozzles. And it's simply a matter of adjusting the top. If you can see if there's a sort of a serrated edge on the nozzle, that's a good indicator that it might be an adjustable nozzle that will let you modify the pattern of that to the appropriate shape if it's not a perfect quarter circle. Other times it is a set pattern, and a good indicator of that is on the top of the nozzle. There will actually be a color code, and then there will be a pattern on the nozzle that will either be in a quarter circle or a half circle or a full circle. And if that's the case, that's a good indicator that it's set and that it's not adjustable. And so again, you just want to make sure your sprinklers are pointed the right way. If we are talking about a multi-stream rotating nozzle, which again are very effective. They have a specialized tool, which you can see in the slide there. It's this little orange adjuster. It goes over the top, and then rotating the nozzle left to right will adjust the arc or the pattern within a certain range. And then in the tip of the tool, there's a little screwdriver that can go into the tiny little screwdriver slot in the top of the nozzle. And then if you, again, kind of righty-tighty, lefty-loosey, if you tighten it down, that will reduce the radius. So if your sprinkler is spraying too far, you want to right tight, reduce it down, and you can adjust the radius or the throw of that sprinkler. And that's true of both the multi-stream rotators and the fixed patterns. There's with just a small standard screwdriver, you can get into that little slotted screw at the top of the nozzle, right, turn, tighten it down to reduce the nut radius, left turn to open it up to its maximum. Generally, the maximum radius will be indicated on the top of the nozzle by a number. Anywhere from 5, 8, 10, 12, 15 are the typical radii. So if you look down and you're not getting any farther than 8 feet, or you're trying to go 10 feet, but the nozzle has a little 8 notched into it, you've kind of gone as far as you can. You might need to go down to the hardware store and swap it out for a sprinkler that has the ability to throw a little bit farther. The other thing you may encounter is the single stream rotor. And for that, we also have a specialized tool. I gotta go. We had one of those. Well, you can see it in the picture here. It's got a specialized tool that lets you pull the rotor up, and then on the top, there are a couple adjustments you can make. The tool has different ends, where in this case, it's like a hex nut that goes into just above where the stream of water comes out. And the nozzle that is in that rotor will shoot out at a certain gallon per minute. And the way that you adjust the radius on that is you tighten down that little barrel screw, and as it goes down, it will begin to impede the stream of water, which will have the effect of shortening the radius and dispersing the spray a little bit. So that's how you really dial in the radius or the spray pattern on a single stream rotator. If you've got one that's just shooting out in a single straight stream and not really effectively watering the landscape in between the sprinkler and the edge of the pattern, then that's one really great way to address that. Another thing to keep in mind when you're checking the performance of your sprinkler heads is that ideally it was designed with what we call head-to-head coverage. And what that means is that you want water from one sprinkler head to spray over and basically hit the adjacent sprinkler head on either side. That's the pattern you want to look for. You don't want to say, I'm not trying to say I've got water from, if my elbow is a sprinkler and this elbow is a sprinkler, I don't want the streams to match, because then you're going to have dry space in the middle. You kind of want head-to-head coverage, if that illustrates it for you a little bit better. And so that's the adjustment that you're trying to dial in. On the single stream rotators, if the arc or there's also an arc adjustment that you can use that same tool for, and it usually has a left hand stop. So once you have the left side set where you want it to be, by turning the arc adjustment, which is in the top of the rotor, and each of the manufacturers has a slightly different way of cracking the nut, but they all have specialized tool, and the general application is the same. You know, right to open it up, right to tighten it down, left to open it up, and you can open it up the arc to generally close to a 360, all the way down to, 20 degrees or so is usually about as tight as they'll get. But again, looking at the top of the sprinkler to determine the manufacturer, if you don't have the adjustment tools that you need for either the multi-stream or a single stream rotator, and then going to a specialty irrigation shop like Ewing or Horizon, they can usually get you set up pretty quickly if they won't just hand them to you oftentimes. Once your sprinklers are dialed in, you want to go and assess if you happen to have a rain sensor incorporated into your controller. You want to make sure that those are cleaned off and haven't gotten gummed up over the winter by leaves or any other debris, but make sure that your wires are connected. You've got good connectivity both at the sensor and in the controller. And here we've got just a nice checklist that can help you go through and make sure that all these steps are addressed, and so that you don't have to try and remember it. So if we get this presentation, print this out, keep it around so that every year you can have this little reminder to work through and then make sure that you're doing these simple things. It's just a really good idea to do this every spring. Do a walkthrough mid-season. Just, you don't have to go to all the detail, but just observe how each zone is performing, because things happen. Landscapes are dynamic and the soil will shift. Kids will play with sprinkler nozzles, dogs will chew them off, lawnmowers will mow them. Just keep an eye on it and try and keep things in check. And then again in the fall, you kind of do a reverse order of this to get things winterized and ready for the winter season. Make sure that the controller is turned to the off position and drain things out if your system has that functionality. Not going to spend too much time on this. If there are questions where this will be helpful, this is a nice diagram that's sort of the anatomy of an irrigation system, if you will. So if we get this presentation out to you in a PDF form, it can be a nice reference on, how are the components of an irrigation system typically laid out. So again, one of the things we really wanted to talk about today was helping people overcome one of the key challenges associated with these standard controllers. And like I say, the last 20, 25 years, these have really become pretty ubiquitous in most modern irrigation systems. And most of them are fairly similar in their configuration, in that they use a dial to navigate throughout the various setting parameters, and then a smattering of buttons to scroll up, scroll down. And they're really pretty great in terms of the potential functionality that they have, but they're also that functionality presents some significant challenges that I encounter every year. So for today's purpose, I'm going to refer back to this model as I demonstrate the issues that we tend to find, or if they have questions. So this is a tool that I take to almost every assessment that I do, and it's just a simple schedule worksheet that really puts the program settings into a tabular format that I can quickly go through, and I can record exactly how the controller is set, and it can pretty quickly send me some red flags or things to adjust. So very quickly, you can see that most controllers have program A, program B. Some have as many as 4, so you're going to have a program C and a program D. You have this section here that covers the schedule, and you generally have the opportunity to schedule for specific days of the week, or go with an interval setting, which is odd or even if there are restrictions, or with a set interval, which is my preferred methodology for setting kind of the active days that would be watered with a traditional timer. And then down here, you get into the individual zones. So in this case, the controller has 6 slots, but I know that there's 4 wires going into it, so we're only talking about 4 zones. Here you'd put a location and a description, for example, lawn zone pop-up sprays. Here you could put a runtime for both program A, program B, and then down here you have your program start times, and you can have as many as 3 individual start times for each program. So hopefully you're able to see here, again, a great degree of adjustability and functionality. But when you're talking about an interface that's basically a 1/2 inch by a 2 inch, you know what, in reality, most folks, it presents a really great opportunity for folks to get a little confused, and some of this functionality gets lost or not quite understood. Um, and so what I want to show is this, here's sort of a basic schedule that you might see, and it gives you the ability to do. In this case, I've got it set with a fixed 3, and what that means is it's going to water every third day. And I really prefer doing something like that in our area because we want to water less frequently and more deeply. What we don't, there's no need in our area to be watering every day unless we're talking about maybe potted plants on a patio or some annuals that are in direct sun all day. You really want to try and get to a place where you at least have a day or two in between, particularly in the spring and the fall, where you may need to be doing some supplemental irrigation, but you certainly don't need to be watering every day. If we're talking about fixed spray pop-ups, generally 8 to 10 minutes is a great place to start. If we're talking about our rotating nozzles or our single stream rotators, typically 15 to 20 minutes. Again, they've got a much slower precipitation rate. 15 to 20 is a good place to start. If things look good at these ranges, try scaling it back if you're trying to be a little bit more efficient. The key here, the takeaway here is we've got one start time for each of these programs. What often happens, and what I'm going to do is jump to this next slide, because this is what we're illustrating what we don't want to do. And this is what I encounter a couple of times every year when I get that call that says, there's no way I'm using this much water. And then I bring my sheet out, I go through the controller, and I see that we've got settings active for every day of the week on both programs. We've got run times on both programs. And we've got, for some reason, 3 start times on both programs. And it's kind of like, you know, the necessary ingredients for fire. You've got fuel, oxygen, and heat. Well, here if you've got an active day, a run time, and a start time, you've got the potential for fire. And the challenge with these little controllers is I think people just, you know, they don't read their manuals and they go out and start pushing buttons and turning dials. And the next thing you know, you've got multiple start times. This is an extreme example, but I have seen cases where every one of them is filled out. And then, you know, you measure the flow rate on each zone, you do the math for them, and you illustrate pretty quickly how, yeah, you did use that much water. Don't feel bad. It happens before, but we can help you adjust your way out of that situation. So don't do this. Don't water every day. Get your manual, understand how to set your clock, take the time to make sure you don't have redundant additional start times that you don't need. Try to go with an interval schedule or at least offset your days of the week, at least one in between, so that you're not watering every day. We're getting pretty close, so I want to touch on a couple other things here. If you want to get some extra credit, let's see, your homework, everybody. Today, I want to make sure if you got a standard controller, locate and review your programming and operation manual, store it by your controller. If you don't happen to have one, it's really easy to find almost every manual out there by looking it up online. Then you can save it as a PDF on your phone. You've got it right there if any questions come up. If you want to take the next step, we've got some great tools that are available to you. Our friends at the Regional Water Provider Consortium have a tool called the Weekly Watering Number, where you can sign up, provide your zip code, and they will send you an email every week that will basically teach you how to make a simple adjustment. So you can do weather-based adjustments on a standard controller throughout the irrigation season. Better yet, we'll actually give you a real credit on your bill if you want to install a weather-based irrigation controller, and we'll talk about those a little bit more in July on how to optimize those at our next Talking Water event.
Awesome. And so we got some more questions in, Steve, and for everyone who's still joining us, we will stick around till these questions are answered. So we'll pick it up where we left off. Dorothy had a question. Can water sense be added to an existing system?
Dorothy, not likely. However, it depends. There are some controllers, if they've been installed within the last few years, that can accept a module that will convert them into a weather-based controller. So what I would advise you to do is take a picture of your controller, both the outside and then if you can open up the inside, send a couple of photos to the email at the end of this presentation, and I would be happy to evaluate that for you.
And Dorothy also asks, are Hunter check valves good? Someone had recommended that.
I'm not sure what you mean by check valve. If you mean the sprinkler heads with a built-in internal, basically a internal a sprinkler that has a check valve built into it so that prevents what we call low head drainage. So when the zone turns off, it prevents that sprinkler from letting water flow out of it. So if you're on a slope, which a lot of folks are in our area, when the zones stop running, the lowest head basically drains all the water in that lateral line out of the lowest head, which can carry away your mulch or just, you're wasting that water. So yeah, it is a good investment. Hunter makes fantastic products. Rainbird makes fantastic products. Those are kind of the big two in terms of sprinkler bodies. But yes, those check valves are great.
And Karen had asked about getting the slides emailed, so I can take that. And Frank helped us in the chat as well. So for everyone on the call, you can get the full slides and the presentation recording via YouTube. You can go to tvwd.org/talkinwater and view that at your convenience. We'll probably get the video up later today or tomorrow morning. Just have to export it, compress the file, and get it online. So we'll get that going as fast as we can. And we've got another question here. Is it okay to mix different types of sprinkler heads within the same sprinkler zone?
We touched on that a little bit earlier. No, ideal. Again, there the one exception. Let me go back to that picture just so I can show you. Clicker's slowing down a little bit. Apologize. Different sprinkler types, again, have different precipitation rates. In particular, you want to avoid mixing pop-up fixed pattern spray heads with single stream rotors. You can mix multi-stream, multi-trajectory rotating nozzles with single stream rotors if they are the type that again have the lower precipitation rate. That's not best practice, but it's better. Again, if you mix a fixed pattern with a single stream rotator, you're either going to be over or undering water depending on which one you accommodate your schedule to.
And great. And then so we've got this would be a good question for you, Steve. I have a drip fed system. Do the tubes, etc., have a natural lifespan after which they should all be replaced?
It's tricky. So if you find yourself constantly making repairs, the answer is yes. Ideally, drip equipment and emitters and the tubing is kind of in between the mineral soil and the mulch or the bark compost or bark soil. So there's some degree of protection from the sun, or in our case, I've got a repair I've got to make from squirrels that like to access the free water on an annual basis. But if it seems like it's brittle and you're having to fix it, if it's not standing out, the other thing you might, if you're experiencing that, making sure that you've got appropriate pressure reduction on a drip zone. Drip equipment is meant to operate at a much lower pressure than most traditional pop-up spray type sprinklers. So making sure that you've got that proper pressure reduction on the electronic valve assembly for that zone is important. And sometimes, there are retrofits that come out of a sprinkler head. So again, if you find yourself maintaining it more often than is convenient, you might want to consider either, replacing that equipment or reevaluating the design.
All right. And Karen asks, what is the best time of day to water?
Well, basically, you want to avoid the heat of the day. Some folks prefer to go between, really early sometime between 9 p.m. to 10 a.m. You just want to avoid the heat of the day ideally. I like to go early morning. A lot of folks are also shifting. There can be more of the early morning hours, say like 5 to 7 is kind of prime showering time when folks are getting ready for work. That can be a stress on your system. So evening might be better, or really early. And if you do that, if you're operating it at a time that you're never going to see the system operating, just again, make sure you're doing a mid-season checkup where you actually do a manual run of the station so that you can get your eyes on how things are performing.
And we've got a raised hand from AU. You can go ahead and take off your mute and ask a question.
Hey, Justin and Steve. This is Angie. I have a question for you. I bought a house about 1.5 years ago, and I thought I just turned the controller on and see what happened, and I watered the road and the driveway for, I don't know, weeks, I believe, because they were going on in the middle of the night, and I wasn't aware. I had somebody come out and kind of adjust the sprinkler heads and make sure they were watering the lawn and not the street. But there are some sprinkler heads that are broken, so I'm not sure if I want to just get a whole new system, or I'm struggling being a single woman and not understanding a lot of these things. I feel like I probably need a little more help. And I have the controller that's on your slide. If you go like 3 or forward, I think it's on 19 or 20. That one. I have that. It's in the garage. Needless to say, last year I just watered by hand, and I just decided not to use it because I'm not familiar with it. I know I threw a lot at you, but any
Okay.
thoughts, tips?
Well, again, I mean, what I would say is, in this case, send me an email. Let me know either your account number or the address, and I can look it up and kind of take a look at what I usually do to start off is do a 5-year history, and I'll kind of give me a look back, and then I can actually see what the previous homeowners do to kind of get a baseline to see was it performing well, and then something went out of whack, or it just gives me a place to start, and it gives me an idea of what our potential opportunity is to reduce the water use. And if nothing else, I can talk you through some of my things online, or excuse me, over the phone. Or if it looks like there's really good opportunity to make some savings, then perhaps we can schedule an on-site assessment where I can come out, run through the system, and kind of look for some red flags or for some things for you to prioritize. Or if it looks like wow, you've really got so many issues that it might be worth considering, starting over, or just definitely not turning it back on until you're able to get certain things remedied.
Sounds great. Thank you so much.
Of course.
All right, we'll be looking for any other final questions here. We've gone a few minutes over, so I really appreciate everyone sticking around with us today, and so many great questions. Hopefully all of y'all are taking the time maybe this weekend when the weather's cooled down again a little bit to check out all that irrigation stuff, all the tips Steve said, making sure your spring irrigation tune-ups are ready. I know I'll be doing it. I've got some risers to put in on some of our planter beds that we buried over the last year in the fall and so forth. So I'll be getting my hands plenty dirty this coming weekend. And with that,
and
last
again,
call for questions.
We don't see any if something like that schedule worksheet would be helpful and you're not able to glean it, extract it from the materials, send me an email. Let me know how many zones you've got. I'd be happy to configure one for you and email it back to you. I'm here to provide technical assistance to our customers with these types of things, and there's no charge for my services, so take advantage of it.
Absolutely. Well, not hearing any more questions, we'll say our final farewells. Thanks again to everyone for joining us for Talking Water today. We'll have the video online as soon as we can. And please email Steve, conservation@tvwd.org. It's in the chat. Frank put it in there. And we look forward to seeing you all in July for some advanced controller, smart controller, I should say, tips as well. And have a great rest of your day. Thanks so much.
Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.